Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time, right here on Genesis Communications Network. Jason is engineering the broadcast. In Minnesota, I'm Vincent Finelli. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you today?
Well, I am sticker. I'm sticker shocked. And let me just share with you very quickly what this is all about. I was telling Jason just as the broadcast was starting that back in 1979, Mrs. Finelli and I saved and saved and saved, and we worked and we had some goals, and we were able to buy a house and put some money down and purchase this house. And we did not purchase it for cash. We had a mortgage note. But in any event, it was a house that nobody wanted. It was built in 1945, right at the end of World War II. It was a model home, and it was showcased in the newspaper that this house, this was the house. And I didn't know it at the time that it was such a well-built house, but when I looked at it, I was pretty impressed. So it had 3 bedrooms, and it had a bathroom upstairs. It was a center hall colonial. It was made out of brick, and it had a front to rear center hall. So you go in the front door, and you could see the back of the house. It would take you right into the kitchen. The living room was there, the dining room, formal dining room. It had a galley kitchen, so the kitchen was not a traditional kitchen of today. You couldn't spend much time in the kitchen. You could cook and wash dishes and prepare food, but there really wasn't much room to do anything else. But it was a very nice house. And on the downstairs, it had a full basement with a fireplace, believe it or not. It had a cast iron oil burner. It was 245,000 BTUs. It was a huge, huge piece of cast iron. The plumbing for the heating system was exquisite. It had a 2-inch pipe, iron pipe, that was designed so that all the in-the-wall cast iron registers would get the same temperature heat. I mean, it was brilliant design, but very expensive to do. And we had nothing to do with building it. We just bought it used after a couple owners have had it. Well, the house had the plumbing for the kitchen sink and the bathroom plumbing and the bathroom sink and the toilet and the shower upstairs and the bathtub and the shower upstairs was all made out of brass, 3/4-inch pipe thread brass. And I did a quick calculation this morning just as the broadcast was starting, and I calculated that house had about 200 feet of hot and cold water brass plumbing. Now, before that, plumbing was galvanized pipe thread. So they made it better and put brass in there. Okay. Well, our son and I put a hot water heater in. I modified the design for a hot water heater to be fired with wood here in the farmhouse in Missouri. And the house that I'm talking about, our first house, was on the East Coast. So we needed a couple pieces of pipe, and the official term is pipe nipples. And I don't know why they're called that, but these are short pieces of pipe, and they have 3/4-inch pipe thread fittings on either end. And that's the same kind of pipe that was used in this house on the East Coast. So we bought, I think 4 of them, but I only needed 2 of them. And they were $8.40 each for 2 inches long. I was stunned at how much they cost. And there's 8% sales tax in Missouri, so that's $9.07. If you if you expand that or extrapolate that out, that's $36.29 a foot times the 200 feet of pipe that would be in this house was $7,258, all things being equal. Now, actually, it would be a little less expensive per foot, for longer pieces, 10-foot or 8-foot sections. But what I'm saying is the house would have about $7,000 worth of pipe uninstalled. That's like 1/10 of the price of the house. Now, if you think about that, the reason they don't use brass plumbing anymore is it's way too expensive. So how did we do it back then? How did, at the end of the war, World War II, how did they build a house with brass plumbing and put a roof on it and make it affordable for people to actually move into? Well, what I'm trying to tell you, class, is that is an example of inflation. We don't use brass plumbing anymore. We hardly build with brick anymore. We make houses with vinyl siding. Vinyl siding. That's temporary siding. Vinyl siding is, if you look at that house that we sold on the East Coast, and you start your stopwatch, like right now, and you build a vinyl-sided traditional construction home with the plastic PEX plumbing today, and you say, which one is going to last longer? I guarantee you, even starting 80 years ago, that house that we used to live in the East Coast will last longer than a brand new vinyl-sided house. That is inflation at its finest. We are replacing quality with substandard everywhere in the United States. So that is just a simple message, and I was stunned at how much it costs for simple pieces of building material. Not only that, I had to sweat the copper pipe. I use copper as well, and the hot water heater is made out of stainless steel for a number of reasons, and someday I'll talk about that as a special project. But I had to sweat the copper pipes with solder, and it is difficult. And I've done it for, I don't know, maybe over 50 years, maybe 55, maybe at least 55 years I've been sweating copper pipes. And I know how to do it. And it's still difficult. And I don't know anybody, not one person today who would consider building a house with copper plumbing. Not one. And I don't know any houses that have copper plumbing other than ours. Now, we don't have all copper plumbing, but where I think it needs to be durable, we do. So the point that I'm trying to make is we are entering an era and have already entered an era of substandard. Minimum to get the job done. Not quality, whatever the minimum is, that's where we are. And it's costing more than it used to. Costing way more than it used to. For less. That's inflation. So I just wanted to share that, Guineith.
Yeah, something this sort of segues into what I was wanting to talk about today about bow making. I should have sent you the video that I was watching earlier on this week about a man, and what he was doing was, he was a white man, but he'd grown up in a part of the United States where there were a lot of American Indians living. And when he was a little boy, he learned how to make Indian bows. Okay, the sort of archery bows that the Native Americans used to make. And there was a video that I had that I found on YouTube, and it was 1.5 hours long. And that's the only reason why I didn't send it to you. I said, Vincent's got better things to do than sit and watch a man build bows for 1.5 hours. But the reason why it took 1.5 hours to make this video was, he'd clipped a lot out. He said just for the basic process of turning a stave into a Native American bow takes 5 or 6 hours of work with a hatchet and with a plane, and, you know, it's not a plane, I think it's called a draw knife, you know, a hatchet of a draw knife, sanding files, and all the rest of it. But he took you through step by step in this process of turning a staff of wood into a Native American bow. And he said, this sort of bow, you could shoot it for about a year and it'd be good. Okay, he said, in an emergency you can make this up and you could take it out after one day's work and you could go hunting and you could feed yourself with this bow. You know, and it was an absolutely beautiful bow. But he said that there's other processes that we can do. It'll take, you know, probably about, you know, there's one set of processes that it will take about, you know, 15 or 20 hours to make the bow up to that set of processes, and that bow will last forever. So to make the bow itself would take 5 or 6 hours, but to make it last practically forever, so that you could hand it on to your children, your grandchildren, they could hand it on to their children, and they could shoot with it and go hunting with it. He said those sorts of processes, they take about another 15 or 20 hours, but he said if you want a really, really, really fine bow, if you want a 1 in 1,000 bow, that's going to take 50 or 60 hours of work to make that bow. And I was like, crud. And here am I complaining that there's this video which is 1.5 hours long explaining how to do the basic steps of making a Native American bow. You know? And the thing is, it's sort of like when I saw this video, I sort of groaned and I said, oh no, 1.5 hours? But I wasn't doing anything in particular, so I sat down and watched it. You know, I had something else that was doing, you know, that I had to sort of stay near the computer. So I thought, oh, well, I might as well have that going on in the background and just sort of watch that while this other process on the computer is going. And, you know, so I did that. And, you know, oh my gosh, we've gotten away from that world, haven't we, Vincent?
Very much so. As a matter of fact, I know the numbers about bows. So let's say a person is lazy and does not want to make his or her own bow and just wants to buy one. So an entry-level bow that you can hunt with is $200 to $400 US. A mid-range is $400 to $800 US. And a higher end is $800 to $1,000 or so for a bow. Now that's without the quiver, and that's without the arrows, just the bow. And if you think about that, the entry level bow today, in today's prices, the entry level bow is about 1/10 the annual salary that my dad made when he started out being a teacher. 1/10. Made $2,800 a year in the 1950s. And he made more than the other teachers because he taught science and he taught after-school classes. They were making $2,400. He made $2,800. So for the cost of 10 of these bows, that was his annual salary. Think about that. That's inflation. We'll be right back. We're talking about substandard, and we're talking about bows. I just want to mention this as an aside. I mentioned previously on the air that I bought some Sunco LED retrofit kits. And these are, if you have can lights, recessed lighting, these round holes in the ceiling, and you want to cover them up, you can get these retrofit kits. And they come with a baffle, and they come with a screw-in, like a standard incandescent base type screw-in adapter with a power cord, and it connects to this LED 5 to 6 inch diameter fixture. And I use 13 watts. And I read about them on the internet. I did some research, and I found the ones that I thought I should buy made by a company called Sunco, S-U-N-C-O. And so I put them where it would be extremely difficult to change the bulbs because we have very high ceilings. So we got on a 10-foot ladder and then stood near the very top of a 10-foot ladder to reach these ceiling lights. And so I put these in, and here's what I found out. That after less than a year, we had some failures. So I called the company, and I just said I bought them on Amazon. No problem. They sent me a replacement. They sent me another replacement. Then one broke, literally broke, and fell off the ceiling because the little tiny screws that they use that are about 1/8 of an inch long, 1/8 of an inch long, were not long enough to hold the light together, and they would part of the light would just fall right from the ceiling. And if you had a cat under there at that height, it would kill the cat, or could kill the cat. So what I found out was I just had 3 more failures. I was livid, absolutely livid. I called Sunco, and the guy said, well, you know, they're only guaranteed for a year, so we can't help you. I was furious because on the box it says that they last for 5 years. Actually, it says that you can save $239 per lamp because they last over 32 years. So I was thinking that these things would last, you know, quite a while, and it wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't need to move furniture and those kinds of things to get that ladder up to change these bulbs or these lights. Well, I was so angry, I called again yesterday. I said, look, I was very polite, and I said that we bought these, and they were able to find it on Amazon, and now they're guaranteed for 7 years, even though the box says 5 years, even though it says that they last for 32 years. And, you know, they replaced them for me for free without me sending in the old ones, and which was kind of nice. So I think it depends on who you talk to. I think it depends on how angry the customers are getting with these, you know, when they call. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the sum of all customers who are furious with these inferior type products. And they know that when I said, yeah, they fell apart and it broke because of the screws aren't long enough to bite into the plastic, and it fell off the ceiling. You know, fortunately, nobody was under it when it happened, but it fell off by itself. Now, do I know how to put these things in? Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's not like Vinny put them in wrong. Vinny, you know, didn't do a good installation job. It was a defect in design and materials, both. So what I'm saying is Sunco is now making good on their warranty. So I'm going to give you the number. If you have Sunco lighting and you have a problem, call this number and be nice and explain what happened. Tell them where you bought them. They'll be able to find it if you bought them on Amazon. That's where most of them come from. So here's the phone number. It's toll free, 844-334-9938. 844-334-9938. So the last part of this little story is I am not taking it anymore, period. Okay? If I've got a problem with a product that I think should have been better, should have lasted longer, I'm on the phone and I'm calling those guys. And if you want to see how difficult it is, just try to find the customer service number for Sunco, S-U-N-C-O. Just try to find it. It took me a couple minutes to find it because, you know, you go to the website and there's a little tab for contact. Click contact. Nothing happens. Maybe it's the browser. Maybe it's slow. No, nothing happens. So you got to keep looking for another link on your search engine to find one that actually will provide the number. So you can do that. Guineith Isaacs and I'll be right back. I went right through the break, or into the break. I'm sorry for that long monologue about Sunco, but I want to tell you, you do not have to take it anymore, and I suggest that you don't. I suggest that you start being polite with your calls. Not that you're not now, but start out being polite, and if it doesn't work, then you can get a little more serious. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and class, I'm hearing more and more stories about those who are less able to defend themselves being taken advantage of, and it makes my blood boil. And the thing I keep thinking about is The Walking Dead and Negan's baseball bat that he called Lucille. That's what I keep thinking about, that baseball bat that was, the business end was wrapped in barbed wire. That's what I keep thinking about when people take advantage of those who are really in a weak position in terms of defending themselves. And I'm hearing more and more stories of it firsthand. Guineith, back to you.
Yeah, I would actually tend to agree. And I was actually having this similar conversation with my son tonight while we were out getting wood. So isn't that really remarkable? About
yes. What's remarkable is that I'm finding that our instructors, and separate from me, are thinking about the same exact things that I'm thinking about. And when they call, we meet on the air saying, yeah, we're thinking about the same things, just as you said. It's happening over and over. It's happening with me and Joey. It's happening with me and you. Right. It's happening with me and Kyle. It's happening with me and George.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I was talking with my son, and I talk a great deal. I talk a lot with my son about, as we're going and getting wood and doing stuff about the place, about what it was like when I was in my past life, okay, or lives rather, multiple, and how things were back then, because I'm finding that I'm remembering how things were 300 and 400 years ago, and some of it I'm looking around in our modern world and I'm going, oh crud, here we go again. Bear in mind that in my Catherine Farrer's past life, I was living at the time of the English Civil War, okay? And that was, we've talked about that. Chimney pots were taxed, windows were taxed. It wasn't safe really to travel on the roads. Most people that didn't travel in their whole life further than 5 miles from the place where they were born. You had to be self-sufficient on your own little parcel of land, because even to venture out of your gate, you were taking your life in your hands, you know. But we are in a worse position today, because back in the day, during the English Civil War, firearms were like water. They were so easily available, you know. Everybody had at least one flintlock or 2 flintlock pistols, and yeah, they took a minute to load, but you know, you had something on you where if there was somebody who came up to you and was really going to do you harm, then you had a good chance of being able to kill them. And there were the police, I mean, the blue team, they did have a blue team back in the day, but they were corrupt. And nobody's surprised there. They were hugely corrupt. They were taking bribes left, right and centre. And one of the biggest policemen in London in the day, back during the English Civil War, was Jonathan Wild, who ended up hanging by the neck until dead for the sake that he ran extortion rackets. That was the fate of Jonathan Wild. And, you know, but I was talking to my son about this, and I said, son, you've got to understand, you know, that these are the times that we're heading back into. These are, you know, going to be really, really bad times. And in that era, I was not a good person, okay? And I was a bandit. I was a, you know, highway robber. I was a highway woman. And I said, I don't want to do that. I believe that God is watching me, and I'm not going to go, you know, robbing little innocent old ladies who are just traveling down the road minding their own business. But there are a lot of people out there who will, and that we all have to be prepared for that. But it's going to be worse this time, because when when the world went through this the last time, which was about 400 years ago, 300 or 400 years ago, you know, people were basically Christians. Even the worst of them, they had some idea of basic morals, and they had a moral center. Most people had a moral center. There were exceptions, you know, especially, you know, not so much in England, not so much in America, but especially in Europe and the Middle East. There were a lot of people who were actually totally evil, who were walking around on the planet at that time. But most people in English-speaking parts of the world, they had at least some moral center, okay? They were like that bow. They were well-balanced. And, yeah, oh, my gosh. There's so many people today, they literally don't know if they're Arthur or Martha. That used to be a saying in Australia, where if somebody was really, really mixed up, you'd say, listen, mate, they don't know if they're Arthur or Martha, okay? And that meant they don't know what gender they are, let alone anything else in this world. You can't make any decisions on your own unless you know whether you have a female set of genitals or a male set of genitals. You can't make any other decisions. And there's people out there who are so confused that they don't even know that. And how can they run a life? And then they're going around and they're, you know, spouting a whole lot of rubbish. They're, you know, trying to convince everybody else that they're right. And that they haven't got a clue. They don't know what's going on. They're totally morally, spiritually, physically confused. And they're destroying our world. And these people are really, really, really common. And this is what, you know, these are the conversations that I'm having with my son. I don't even hardly know what to say. So I think that everybody would be really well advised to get whatever sort of home defense they can right now. Because these hordes are about ready to explode. And I would say that they're unthinking and they're as close to a zombie horde as anything that you're going to get. And they, you know, we're on the brink here in Victoria of having the whole grid collapse because, you know, the state premier thought it was a good idea to go shutting down a third of the electrical supply. And then they've lost another third through accidents and all that sort of thing. That means that they're only going to have 1/3 of their electrical supply, and, you know, that's not going to go down well. You know, and the whole world's changing. People in Melbourne are so, you know, it's becoming a really, really common thing in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, for people to install yellow bollards in their driveway to stop their car from getting carjacked out of their own suburban driveway. That's not even rare. That's really, really common. Yeah, there's businesses out there who are setting these things up. They're going from house to house and saying, hey, you want to buy, and they're putting ads in the newspaper and on the TV and on the radio. Get your yellow bollards from us. Stop your car from being carjacked. We have ones with little motors. Look, you can press the button and it goes, and, you know, it goes down and then you can drive out and then the bollard press the other button and goes, and goes back up, you know. And then you got the old ones, which are the old-fashioned ones with the padlocks. You know, these are the things that used to be installed in places like hospitals and universities and that sort of thing, sports grounds. You know the sort of yellow bollards that I'm talking about, don't you, Vincent?
Yeah, I do. I was at Habitat for Humanity during the summer, and they had a bunch of them, and you could put a steel pipe in the ground and hammer it in, or, you know, press it in with the front end of a bucket, from a backhoe or a bulldozer and push it in or drill it or dig it by hand and fill it with concrete and then put this yellow cover over it. So I bought one. I literally bought one. And then why would I do that? Because we have our solar panels near our driveway, and people I don't know what it is, but it happens with urinals in the men's room. It happens with sinks in the men's room. People use the closest one. Whichever one is the closest to when they walk in, that's the one they use. And they would drive over our grass and tear up our grass and almost hit the solar panel array on the way in or out. Now, I'm not talking about my family. I'm talking about people who just show up. And I was sick of it. So I pounded in a steel post. I put the bollard over it, and it's really clear. So now they don't drive over the grass. But I had to do that. And that wasn't to keep people from stealing our vehicles. We've got projectiles for that. But, yes, it's a nuisance.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so here's, on that line of thinking, we're talking about defending ourselves, home defense, if you will, personal defense. And yesterday on the air, we were talking, and Kyle called in, George called in, and right then and there on the air, we decided, I asked them if they'd like to be on a broadcast and talk about tools for self-defense. I'm talking about rifle, pistol, shotgun, etc., ammunition. And so on Monday, Dr. Norm Shealy will be, he's going to be on television and or videotaping a television show, so he will not be with us on Monday. So we had an opening, and George and Kyle and I are going to be talking about rifle, pistol, shotgun, ammunition, reloading, and what you need to know. So the three of us are going to have about 150 years combined experience in doing this. Now, I'm not saying any one of us is an expert, but I am saying that we have about 150 years experience with these tools, and we're going to teach that class. So here's one more example, Guineith. You're talking with your son about how society is devolving, how we need to protect ourselves, and unknown to you at the time, Kyle and George and I have decided on the air that we're going to teach this class. So this is what Guineith was talking about, that we're not the only ones talking about these things. We'll be right back. So for 2 hours on Monday, class, we'll be teaching you what we think you should know about in terms of rifle, pistol, shotgun. And ladies, if you're thinking, you might want to get one, well, we will offer our advice on what we think is the best way to go. And there's only one thing that's not on the table on Monday, and that is, we'll certainly take all your questions if you choose to call in, but one thing we will not tell you, and I've mentioned this to both George and Kyle, we will not offer up to you what we have. We will not do that. But we'll tell you what we think works, okay? So we're not going to tell you what we have because the other team's listening. And they'll have to find out, for themselves if they're that interested. Guineith, so here we are. You and I are talking, on air about things that we are thinking about off air. And it seems like a lot of us are doing this. We're all of a very similar mindset. I'm trying to teach our family the things that, the way they used to be, believe it or not, and what works and what doesn't work. I am really busy doing that. I mean, it's almost like it's a full-time job. Everything that we do now is a lesson. So if I'm under a vehicle with our son or Mrs. Finelli, anecdotal evidence, anecdotal stories come up, and I say, okay, here's how I did this, and here's what worked, and here's what didn't work. It's like that all of our waking days now with our children, our family. Everything's a lesson. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything. When we're in the truck, when we're shopping, all the time is now high speed. You need to know this. And so that's what we're doing. Is that what you're saying that you're doing, Guineith, as well?
Yeah. Yeah. Here's another small example. Okay. Now, we have a number of dogs here. But one of the dogs that we have, and most of our dogs are on the spectrum of Border Collie and Jack Russell and assorted breedings in between. That means that some of them are quite short in the leg, although they're still quite hefty dogs, you know. Border Jacks, they are an absolutely amazing dog. They've got all the cleverness of the Border Collie and all of the personality and just delightful nature of the Jack Russell and a bit more of the business end nature of a Jack Russell, because a Jack Russell might be a small dog, but it is a terrier, and it's a big dog and a little dog body. And anyway, we have this Border Jack dog, and he got a grass seed in his eye because it's springtime here, and we have our main growing season in the winter, or it's actually summer now, but we have our main growing season in the winter, so the place is covered in dry grass, and there's millions and millions and millions of grass seeds out there at the moment because that's the time of year that it is. And he got a grass seed in his eye, and I could tell that he was in distress. I thought, well, he's got something in his eye. It's either a cactus spike or a grass seed, because we're cactus farmers too. But anyway, I got him, and I was able to get the grass spike out of his eye. It was a wild oat, and the thing about wild oats is they have got a mechanism which is built into them where when it gets damp, it expands and it screws itself in to the soil. But when you get when a wild oat seed goes into your when you get something like that in an awkward corner and you're a dog, like your eye or your ear or whatever, the seed digs itself into the body, the flesh of the dog. Anyway, I got this grass seed and I pulled it out of his eye, and you've got to pull it out the same way it came in, right? There's a specific way of doing it, okay? Okay? And I said, I pulled it out and then I showed it to my son. And he said, crikey. And I said, yeah, that's why he's had a sore eye for the last 2 days. And I said, right, now come out here, son. I'm going to take you out to the garden. So I took him out to the garden and I showed him a particular plant. I'd actually already made the medicine, okay? I said, see that plant there? That plant's called clary sage. You get this much, and you grind it up with a mortar and pestle. You get, you put this much water in, you put this much salt in, you make it up into a saline infusion, and then you get that, and you wash out. You use it as an eye rinse, an eye bath for the eye. Anytime any eye infections, eye injuries, anything like that, an infusion of saline and clary sage, it'll get rid of the problem, sometimes within as little as half an hour. But because this was actually a physical injury as well, it took, this was yesterday that this happened, so, getting pretty close to...
Hold that thought. We're going into a break. Class, Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. She's staying up late at night to be with us. She's a volunteer, as is everyone here at USA Prepares, and I want to thank you, Guineith, for doing that. You mentioned mortar and pestle, and I want to spell this for those of you who have not seen these words before. Mortar, M-O-R-T-A-R. That's one part. And pestle, P-E-S-T-L-E, is the other part. These things have been known to be used for 37,000 years. There's nothing new about these. You can get them in lots of materials. So there's a bowl, and then there's a handheld part that's like the part that smashes what's in the bowl. And you can use these for lots of things. You can use these for cooking in the kitchen. You can grind peppercorns into very, very fine powder with these. So it's the kind of thing that if the police show up at your house and you've got one on your kitchen table, they're going to say, "Where'd you get that mortar and pestle, boy or girl?" Because they'll think drugs. But that's not what they're for. They're for all kinds of uses, grinding things into a small, fine powder. That's what they're for. And they are used in cooking and lots of things, as Guineith just mentioned. Guineith, can you describe your mortar and pestle, please?
My mortar and pestle is rather a small one, okay. It would be maybe, maybe 4 inches across, 5 inches across maybe. That's the outside of the bowl, okay. And my mortar and pestle is actually quite a rare one. You won't find very many that are made like mine, because my mortar and pestle is made out of 1,000-year-old olive wood. How's that? Really, really, really hard. Hand-turned, okay, from the pruning of an olive tree. I forget where. I think somewhere in the Middle East, maybe Israel, maybe Syria or Damascus, that there's this olive farm that's there, and their olive trees are thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, but they need pruning. So sometimes, all trees need pruning sometimes, especially fruit trees like olive trees. And so they get the prunings of these olive trees and they put them in a lathe and they turn them up and they turn them into bowls and platters, mortars and pestles, and various other implements. And so my mortar and pestle is made out of 1,000-year-old olive wood. And do you know something? If it got put somewhere where it was able to survive and stay dry and stay, somewhere where it's not going to rot, then somebody could come around in 1,000 years' time and still, 2,000, 3,000 years' time, and still use that wooden mortar and pestle, which is made of olive wood, 1,000-year-old olive wood. How's that, Vincent? I'll bet you've never heard of anything like that, have you?
Well, I know that they are made of granite, wood, marble, stone, ceramic, stainless steel, brass, glass, cast iron, plastic, other metals, and aluminum. However, the wood ones are absolutely exquisite looking. But here are a couple of tips let's share a couple tips. So if you're considering buying one, you can buy one for $3 shipped and delivered from Asia on the internet, or you can spend more. Guineith, what would we never planned on talking about this, but I think we should. What would you look for in a mortar and pestle set? What things would you say, here are some criteria to consider, and here, don't do this? What would that be?
Okay. I would say that the mortar, that's the part that, does the hammering. It needs to have a curve on the bottom of it that fairly closely matches the curve on the bottom of the bowl. Okay? So the curve on the bottom of the mortar and the curve on the bottom of the bowl need to be closely matched, because otherwise you're not going to get a good grinding surface. Okay? I would say, my mortar and pestle is quite a small one, but I would say that within reason, the bigger the better. A larger mortar is going to take more muscle power to heave. You see extremely large mortars and pestle. especially in tribal regions of Africa, where the women still use these really, really enormous mortars and pestles, where the mortar might be 3 feet or 4 feet long, and maybe 5 inches wide, and the pestle is actually carved out of a tree stump that is still in the ground. That's how they do it in Africa. Now, I would say that that's really, really good for if you've got no other method of grinding up large quantities of grain, but that sort of mortar is going to take some sort of muscle power to heave. But these women are used to it. They've been doing it their whole lives. And, I would say that that's a useful tool for them. I've also seen them on videos being used, similar mortars and pestles being used in South America, by the way, okay, by the South American Indian tribes there. Mortars and pestles are one of the most ancient tools. They go all the way back to the Stone Age. I don't know of any nation on earth that has not used some manner of mortar and pestle, Vincent. They're just universal, and they're great, But I would say that the other thing is, I would look for the durability of the material. Now, you might be able to get a $3 mortar and pestle from China shipped to you from Amazon, but is that mortar and pestle still going to be around? Is it going to be something that you're going to be able to hand on to your children and grandchildren? Because my mortar and pestle will be. I'll be able to, hand that on to my children. They'll be able to pass it on to their children down through the centuries, because it's very well made in the first place. It didn't cost, $60. It didn't cost $3 off of Amazon. It cost, I forget the exact price, but it was somewhere between $60 and $80 from a local retailer, from an actual shop in Bendigo. That shop is now shut, unfortunately. But this particular shop used to sell a lot of preparedness-type items, including these olive wood cutting boards, mortar and pestles, etc. But you don't, this goes with anything. You don't treat it roughly. You don't drop it, okay? Coating of oil, especially olive oil, does it really, really, really good. That's really, really beneficial for it. Just, every now and again, just when you feel that you need to, you just get it and you get some olive oil and you rub it inside and out, and you rub the mortar inside. You rub the mortar all over, and then you just set it up to dry. It's been treated with beeswax, so if you wanted to rub some beeswax on it as well, that would be pretty good. And normally what I would do, normally I would have separate mortars and pestles for medicinal herbs and for cooking. But most of the medicinal herbs I have at the moment are actually not that toxic. And so I've still got to get a second mortar and pestle. And given that most of my medicinals are not that toxic anyway, I'm currently using the same mortar and pestle for both medicines and food. But it's not ideal. I just make sure that I wash it thoroughly afterwards. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yes, and I've got a couple comments. They have. I'm on eBay right now, and I'm looking at mortars and pestles, and they've got really shallow ones, more like a soup bowl, which I don't think is a good idea, and they've got really deep ones, and I don't think that's a good.
The bowl should be deep.
Yeah,
the bowl should be quite deep.
And on the bottom of the surface of the bowl, if you want to call it that, it should have a non-slippery surface, not too slippery. So, for example, if you're trying to grind peppercorns, and you have a glazed ceramic bowl, those peppercorns are going to race around, and it's going to be difficult to crush them. So the one I have is a very plain porcelain mortar and pestle, and the grinding surfaces are textured lightly. So it would have the finish of, let's say, not of a concrete wall, but just lightly textured, so that if I'm grinding peppercorns, they aren't going to race around and be hard to find and catch. Yeah. So that's something important. And the weight of we'll call it the bowl, needs to be heavy enough so that you can hold it with your left hand if you're right-handed and grind with your right hand, because you're going to have to hold both pieces. And you don't want to slide, because it'll be frustrating. So I see some that are on eBay, and they look like they are stamped stainless steel or machine-made stainless steel, lightweight. And I don't think that's going to work so well. I think you really need a heavier material. So those, and also the shaft of the mortar they have these that would be almost like two eggs stuck together end to end. Too short. You need one that's long enough so that your hand is not...
You need to be able to hold it in your hand.
Right.
Comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that will vary from person to person, because people's hands are different sizes. And what I often do, because I watch a lot of... Because I trained as a geographer and as an environmental scientist, I watch a lot of ethnographic type videos, and I watch how the native women do it. They hold it between their thighs. They clamp the mortar between their thighs. They clamp the pestle between their thighs, and that's how they do it. And I say, well, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me.
Mm-hmm. I use it on a table.
That's how I generally hold it.
Yeah. All right, we'll be right back. We took a detour and started talking about the mortar and pestle. And class, if you're wondering what we're talking about, that would be, if you looked at the side view, that would be used a lot in pharmacies as their icon, the mortar and the pestle. And you might see the RX or prescription symbol with it. That's what we're talking about. And one thing I would not do is I would not buy an aluminum one. Whether the mortar or the pestle would be aluminum, I would not do that, because you're going to be grinding with it and you will be eating aluminum no matter how you do it. So I would consider a wood one. I would consider a granite one. I would consider a porcelain one, but I would not consider one that had a slippery surface on the grinding area. If it's too slippery, it's not going to work too well. I mean, imagine you wanted to crush something like an aspirin, for example. I'm not suggesting you do this, but let's say you did want to do that, and you tried to crush that in the bottom of a soup bowl. It would slide a little bit, but if it was textured at the bottom, that aspirin would not race around the bowl. Okay, that's why you want one that is slightly textured. So you can spend very little, or you can spend a lot. I haven't experimented with granite, but I'm happy with the one I have, and I've had it for 55 years. So I think it's something you might want to consider for your preparedness kits, because you may need to grind some herbs and make use of what's in nature. Seriously, those are my thoughts. Any other comments about the mortar and pestle?
I would say that of all the preparedness items, this is one that's pretty well a must. And I lived for a number of years. I had a mortar and pestle when I was in Geraldton. I think I had a marble one in Geraldton, but I wasn't able to pack it. It was too heavy, and I had to leave it. So I lived for a number of years without one. I really, really missed having a mortar and pestle. And I was absolutely delighted when I came across the one that I've got at the moment, the olive wood one, in this particular shop. And, I wouldn't be without one because they're so useful. Another thing I use my mortar and pestle for is the shells from the chicken eggs, I grind them up with the mortar and pestle, and I feed them back to the chicken to make the chicken have strong shells on its eggs. And, this is it. So it's just such a useful tool. And you can use it for making amazing pestos. You can use it for making all sorts of wonderful sauces, for crushing herbs and spices and all of this sort of thing, for cooking in the kitchen, as well as for making medicine. This is, I grow a lot of medicinal herbs here. Like I said, I was mentioning about the clary sage, and I didn't get time to mention the outcome of the clary sage, but his eye is just about healed. And this is just a day or two after pulling the grass seed out, and that's from having clary sage washes on his eye. And God has given us all the medicine that we need in the plants that grow. And if we learn what they are, if we learn how to prepare them and how to use them, we can really look after ourselves medicinally if we have a good knowledge of herbs, because for thousands of years, that was the only medicine that people had, was herbal medicine, and it's as good now as what it was before, But a mortar and pestle is more or less an indispensable tool in preparing herbal medicine. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yes, absolutely. And so I looked up, while we were doing this, I looked up some of the recommendations. And the Internet has come up with the same recommendations that you and I have. The bowl must be sturdy enough, heavy enough, so it's easy to hold on to. The pestle, the mortar itself has to be shaped, to match. You have to have matching surfaces, and you have to be able to clean it. So we all agree. So there you go. We'll be right back. So class, tomorrow it's Ricky Rocket, and then on Friday, Nurse Tracy's going to be with us. And for hour number 1, hour number 2, it'll be some tips that I've put together over the years, preparedness, survival tips, the way we do things at the Finelli Farm. Guineith's with us live in Australia. Guineith, I was thinking about as things get tougher, and I absolutely positively believe that they will. And we are so addicted to electricity that even you, living off grid, will feel some of the effects of a grid down situation, because you won't be able to buy pretty much anything that you want to buy. So you're going to be locked in, as we are, to trading. So I'm thinking, how does this play out? So in your world, in Australia, in our world, in the United States, people are going to want things that we have. They may want some meat from our cows. They may want some eggs from your chickens. And so you can be really nice and say, listen, I've got 12 eggs and you can have them all. I just won't eat anymore. Or you can say, I'll tell you what would you like to exchange for 2 eggs? What would you like to exchange? Or I could say, well, you want some beef, and we have some. We were able to preserve it. We have made some beef jerky, and that'll keep for a while. What would you like to trade for that? And that's where the problem comes in, because I have a feeling that the people who are going to want what you have, Guineith, and want what people like we have, I guess the word is put back, what are we going to trade for? What are they going to have that we want? And I think the list is going to be really short and thin. What do you think?
I think that these people that I'm seeing walking around, they don't have anything to offer.
Right.
You know, I'm talking about the Blue-Haired Brigade.
Mm-hmm.
They can't give me anything that I haven't got already. I would like to sort of segue here into a topic I emailed you about earlier, and that was how to get information now.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Maybe I'm aware that the other team's listening. Okay. So I'm going to be really, really careful with how I word this. And I'm pretty sure you've got a good idea of where I'm going right now, because I emailed you earlier about this topic. There is a part of the Internet that is not regulated and not really monitored, okay, where there is a lot of information that is tremendously useful that is not available on Google, okay. That network is called the Tor network, T-O-R network, okay, and it's the dark side of the Internet, and at the bottom of that rat hole is every disgusting thing that you could imagine and a lot of stuff that you wouldn't want to imagine, but there's also a lot of stuff on there. By the way, I am assuming that people who are listening to this broadcast, I am not advising you to go there, to the Tor network, okay? All that I'm saying is that it's there and there's a lot of really, really useful information on it, okay? Useful information and useful products, okay? I am not advising that anyone should go and, access resources from the Tor network. I would not advise that because it's a place that's not for children, okay? But we are facing a collapse scenario, and in a collapse scenario, the rules change. And you have to be aware that the Tor network is there because in the future, it might be a place where you can get resources, okay? You may be able to access it, depending on your location, through dial-up internet. You might be able to do that, okay? You might be able to make connections and find information and resources that you need. And, but it's something where, like I say, it's not a place for children. But let's take an example. Going from what we were just talking about, plants and herbs and medicine, okay? Let's say I had a particular plant growing on my land, okay? And I said, wow, gee, that's an interesting plant. I wonder what that's used for. So I would take a botanical sample of it. I would, maybe pull one up and bring it home, and I would go online. I would have a good guess at what sort of species it was and all the rest of it. And I would go online and I would try and look it up. And I might get information from Google or I might not, or my other favourite search engine. By the way, the whole of the Tor network, one of the major search engines that operates on the Tor network is DuckDuckGo. Fancy that, Vincent? Amazing, isn't it? That is one of the major search engines that they use. And it's built on the back of Mozilla Firefox. So basically a bunch of coders got together, they got Mozilla Firefox, they got the people from Mozilla to work with them, and they modified Firefox to be much, much more functional, much more secure, and much less traceable than it otherwise would be. And that is basically the basis of the Tor network. And when you're on the Tor network, you basically cannot be traced, okay, if you set it up properly and if you behave yourself as you are supposed to on that network. And there are rules for behaving on that network. I'm not going to tell people what they are. You need to go and find that out for yourself. And you need to use your common sense. And I'm assuming that people in the class are not children. I'm not your grandma, I'm not your mum, and I'm not your nanny, and I don't tell you what to do or don't do. that this is a thing that can be really, really useful. Because let's say I had a fungus growing on my land and I wanted to look it up to see what its medicinal properties were. If it was a certain species of fungus, I might get flagged by Google, and I might attract attention that I really don't want, just for wanting to satisfy my scientific curiosity about what a particular fungus is for. And so if I found an unusual fungus, in previous times I probably would have gone to my favorite search engine or whatever it was to look it up. But these days I wouldn't do that. I would go on the Tor network to look up that particular fungus. For one thing, I would probably get more information about the properties of fungus XYZ. And for another thing, I would be able to get that information without being tracked. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Sure, absolutely. And you know what you're talking about, Guineith, is actually the way it should be. You should be able to search and look and read and learn without the fear of being tracked by big technical corporations and big government corporations, and even little government corporations, and people showing up at your door because, why were you looking that up, girl or boy? What's with you? And the mortar and the pestle thing, that's proof now. That's proof that you've been doing something that we don't want you to do.
Yeah, that's basically how it is. And by the way, I'm a scientist. I trained as a scientist. I'm interested in ethnobotany. Now, ethnobotany is simply the study of how indigenous tribes use plants, okay? It can cover everything from the use of fibers, basket weaving, food plants. It can also cover how indigenous tribes use particular plants for ceremonial use, okay? And I'm interested in plants as medicine, and certain plants, they are immensely useful medicinally, but if you take them in the wrong way, they will kill you. And one very good example of that is digitalis, okay? Garden foxglove, digitalis officinale, okay? Now, digitalis is a highly, 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 highly toxic plant, and I would not recommend that anyone outside of a collapse situation go making medicines out of digitalis. And if you are going to, prepare digitalis, you better have a special mortar and pestle, especially for the digitalis that you're preparing, okay, because it's really, really very, very toxic. But if you have somebody with heart problems and you have foxglove growing, then you'd better have a little supply of digitalis stored and dried correctly, because you could save somebody's life by giving them the appropriate dosage and medicine of digitalis, okay? Now, outside of the medical system being functioning, this could be the difference between life and death for somebody that you know and love. But this information has disappeared off of Google. Google doesn't have this information anymore of how to use plants like digitalis, because there was a United Nations thing that was put out a few years ago, and basically restricting and standardizing the use of all herbal medicine, And like I say, I would not recommend at all using, I would say if somebody has that level of heart issues, that they probably do need to be on the heart medications that the doctors give them. But if there's a systemic collapse and these heart medications go away, it's going to have to go back to the way things always were anyway. And if you've got somebody who's going to die, unless you give them the digitalis medicine, yes, you risk killing them with the digitalis medicine, but they might die anyway if you don't try it. Okay? That is the level that we're working at. Does that make sense, Vincent? So in that case, it's worth a try.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's basic. But that information is on the Tor network, but it's more or less disappeared off the regular internet. And there's a whole cadre of this type of information, really, really useful survival-type information that is still on the dark web, that is not on the regular internet anymore. And some of this information could be the difference between life and death for particular people out there in the class. So, and they have to be aware where they can get this information.
We'll be right back. Class, I just went to eBay and I typed in Encyclopedia of Healing Remedies, Shealy, as in Norm Shealy. And for $4.85, you can buy a copy. You can buy a hard copy or a paperback. It's an encyclopedia. I suggest if you're only going to buy one book in your life, this is what you should consider in the area of healing remedies. Have you seen this encyclopedia, Guineith?
I haven't seen that one. I would love to have it. I think I might order it at some stage. I used to have a book in Geraldton, which was immensely useful. I'm into books. I'm into actual physical books. And this book was called The Herb Book, and the author was John Lust, L-U-S-T. And that had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of herbs and their medicinal uses, their culinary uses, and how to prepare them. And that is one book I really miss. But I think that I would also like Dr. Norman Shealy's book, because he's a great guy. He's absolutely amazing. And, he's another fellow. He has many, many lifetimes of experience on this earth of being a medical doctor. And when you've got somebody like that in a particular field that has had multiple lifetimes of experience in a certain area, they're just a wellspring of resources. And if you have somebody like that in your life who's a personal friend, you are the most blessed, you're the most fortunate, lucky person on the face of God's earth. You really are. And I feel very fortunate to call Dr. Shealy my friend, and also Dr. Richard Allen Miller and yourself and so many other people that, that are just available, and that we can, we can get in touch with them and just ask them. Now, the reason why I was talking about the Tor network is it might give people an edge in survival in what's to come. And, that's the reason why. For instance, there is a YouTube channel out there, and it's called the Slingshot channel, okay? And I would not, you can access the Slingshot channel on regular internet, but these days I probably wouldn't. But it has how he does on his channel. He does all sorts of amazing things with projectile firing devices that he builds himself at home. He has a workshop, okay, and he builds these projectile firing devices. And many of them are simply marvelous with his ingenuity. And, but that's the sort of thing in my country that is, maybe frowned upon. And I've got no intention of building any of these machines that he built, but it's just very interesting to watch, of how he does it. And he follows all the laws, and he advises that everybody always follow the laws in their location, and I advise the same thing. But it is really interesting to watch the ingenuity of human beings hard at work, Vincent. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, and one of our instructors is Dr. McCarrick, and he is the founder of the company and the designer of the sling bow that you hear advertised right here on USA Prepares.
They're
he
and I've made one of those. I made mine out of a piece of PVC conduit. It's possible to do that.
Yes.
And if you look up on YouTube, they will describe to you how to make a sling bow out of a piece of PVC conduit for just a few dollars. So there's this sort of information that is out there that is tremendously useful, okay? And, the sling bow is an absolutely marvelous weapon. I like it. Yeah.
And you can use it for fishing and hunting and, just having some fun. But, it's primitive. It's been around for a long time. As a matter of fact, when I was in elementary school, I made a slingshot out of a heavy coat hanger, a couple heavy elastic bands, and I made the pouch out of felt, maybe, I would say 1/8 of an inch thick felt, punched 2 holes in it, and it worked great. And I'd use it around the backyard and, plink with it. Use it for target practice. I don't know, maybe today that kind of a thing is frowned upon, but oh well. So it's important that you have lots of skills and learn what you can and get hard copies of things as quickly as you can, because it seems like the hard copies are being replaced with, the cloud. Guineith, thank you so much for being with us today.
God bless you and have a good week.